Seattle, April 2016. Registered nurse Ingrid Line, 40 years old, goes to a baseball game with a man she met through a dating site about a month earlier. 36 hours later, her remains will be found in ordinary trash containers 10 miles from her home in Renton. Police will identify a suspect within 3 days. He will turn out to have a criminal record across 6 states and a court filing from his own parents, 10 years old, asking for protection from their son. How could a woman who saved other people's lives every day fail to see who she had let into her own home? This is the story of one evening that was supposed to end like any other. Ingrid Marie Line, 40 years old, walks down the corridor of Swedish Medical Center in Seattle the way people walk when this work has long become part of who they are. Her badge says, registered nurse. There is a pen in her scrubs pocket and a clipboard with assignments in her hand. In the evening, she gets into her car and drives home across the bridge from the city to Renton, a quiet suburb where she owns a house on a calm street. Around her, there are level lawns, low fences, and neighbors who say good morning. On shift, she watches over critically ill patients. She hands out medication, monitors IV drips, keeps an eye on the readings. Whether the doctors catch a change in a patient's condition in time often comes down to how closely she is watching. Colleagues describe Ingrid as energetic, responsible, and attentive to detail. She remembers names, she remembers what each patient is afraid of. She knows how to speak calmly with people who are scared. In a hospital setting, people like that are valued more than any title. After her shift comes ordinary American life. Morning runs, weekend walks, involvement in the local community, simple everyday pleasures. A few years earlier, she went through a divorce, and she does not like to talk about it in detail. After the divorce, she tried to rebuild her life calmly, without drama, step by step. Those close to her, her family, and friends, see her as one of the most dependable women they know, the kind of person you can lean on. People come to her for advice. They trust her with their keys and their requests. In the spring of 2016, Ingrid decides for the first time in a long while to try her personal life again. It is not a loud decision and not a break with how she has been living. It is just a small step sideways, an attempt to open up to someone again after several years lived alone. She does not yet know where this step will lead. That step sideways begins the same way it does for thousands of American women her age. Ingrid signs up on one of the popular dating sites. In Seattle and its suburbs, online dating long ago stopped being something exotic. It is part of everyday life. Coworkers discuss profiles on their breaks. Friends suggest who is worth a closer look, who to reply to, and who to skip. After a long pause, Ingrid decides she is ready to try as well. She is not looking for adventure or for a dramatic story. In her own words, later passed on by those close to her, what she wanted was a calm partner without complications for a normal relationship. No double bottom, no drama, just someone you can have dinner with, watch baseball with, talk to about work and about life. At her age, that is a clear and grown-up request to make of the world. Among the many profiles she scrolls through every day, her attention is caught by a man who introduced himself as John. The profile looks ordinary. Name, age, a few photos, a short description of his interests. Nothing extravagant, but also nothing that would set off any inner alarm. In their messages, he comes across as a steady conversation partner, an even tone, normal topics, no oddities from the first messages. They start chatting, exchange short replies, then move on to longer conversations, then to meeting in real life. By the beginning of April 2016, their short relationship has lasted about a month. By the standards of online dating, this is no longer a first date, but it is also not a serious stage. They are still feeling each other out. None of Ingrid's friends know anything about this man beyond what he has said about himself. She herself has no information about his real past. In front of her, there is a profile, a chat thread, and a few in-person meetings. Everything outside that frame stays invisible. What stayed outside that profile actually looks nothing like the chat. John Robert Charlton, 37 years old. Officially, he is a day laborer, the kind of man who picks up a one-time job when one is offered. In reality, he is homeless. He has no permanent home, no permanent job, no steady income. He sleeps wherever he can, sometimes with people he knows, sometimes in shelters, sometimes wherever a spot can be found for the night. Ingrid does not know any of this. Behind Charlton stands a record that stretches across 6 states. It is not a few minor episodes, but a long trail of criminal cases. In 2006, in Utah, he is convicted of aggravated armed robbery. That is a serious charge, the kind that carries real time. In 2009, in Montana, he is charged with grand theft. In different states, his record includes auto theft, assault, petty theft, and arrests. 6 states, 6 different stories with the law. He himself will later describe his life to investigators briefly and without polish. In his own words, he is homeless, an alcoholic, and a man for whom things are, as he puts it, not all right. That self-description will appear in police records and reach the press. It is the voice of a man who knows what he looks like from the outside and does not try to soften the picture. That biography is nowhere reflected in his profile on the dating site. There is no mention of convictions on the page, no reference to the states where he was prosecuted, no trace of the fact that he is homeless. The man who sits across from Ingrid at a cafe table and who later shows up for a date is a calm man willing to go to a baseball game with her. She sees a person, not his past. That invisibility of his past is not just a gap in a profile. Warning signs around Charlton existed long before he met Ingrid, and they were seen by the people who had known him the longest. As far back as 2006, his own parents go to court for a restraining order against their son. That is an extraordinary step for parents to take. People only do this when fear for their own safety becomes stronger than family ties. In their petition, they describe in detail what they are afraid of. According to them, their son holds on to resentments for a long time, capable of nursing grievances for years and not letting go of minor episodes. Under the influence of alcohol or drugs, he becomes aggressive, and then those grievances turn into action. They separately describe a domestic episode after which their fear became concrete. That gesture was enough for them to go to court. All these details settle into the police and court archives of the state. They become official documents. But an ordinary woman from Renton, scrolling through profiles on a dating site, has no access to those documents. The dating site does not request a background check from new users. It does not ask for criminal history records, does not match names against police databases, and does not show that behind a nice profile stands 6 states and a parental restraining order. The arithmetic that comes out of this is simple and frightening. Ingrid is dating a man whose own parents once warned a court about him. About 10 years lie between that warning and their date. Over those 10 years, Charlton did not become calmer. He was not treated for alcoholism. He did not stop in front of the law. 10 years after that filing by his parents, the two of them will end up in the same house on the evening of April 8, 2016. That evening starts the way an ordinary Friday in a big American city starts. Seattle, Washington State, April 2016. The air has already warmed up to a comfortable spring temperature, and the city has the weekend ahead. Ingrid and Charlton are planning to go to a Seattle Mariners baseball game at Safeco Field. Baseball in Seattle in spring is part of city life. People go to games as couples, as groups of friends, as families, and after the game the streets around the stadium fill with people in team caps. Ingrid bought the tickets to this game in advance. Police will later confirm this as they reconstruct the last hours of her life. She is looking forward to the evening as a normal date after a work week. Shift at the hospital behind her, a simple pleasure and a good atmosphere ahead. They get to the stadium, take their seats, watch the game together. There is nothing in those 3 hours of baseball that should raise an eyebrow. On camera footage and according to witnesses, they look like an ordinary couple sharing an ordinary spring evening. Nothing in their behavior raises suspicion among those around them. No arguments, no tension, no troubling moments. Those who see them in the aisles and in the stands describe the couple as calm and steady. That detail matters. Between the outward picture and what will happen a few hours later, there are no obvious signs. No one would have thought that these two people would part not by going home to separate houses, but in the way they are about to part. After the game, they decide to keep the evening going. That is a normal continuation of a Friday. Baseball, then a bar, then wherever. They go to one of the city bars near the stadium. From this point on, the evening will start to bend in another direction. This decision will be the last normal episode in her life. Inside the bar, things slowly start to shift. Charlton drinks heavily. By his own later words, by the end of the evening, he was very drunk. That is a detail he will himself emphasize to investigators, and it is the same detail that will become central to his defense. Witnesses who saw the couple at the bar will describe him as visibly intoxicated by the time they left. That is what is recorded in the case file. Ingrid stays with him. She does not cut the date short, does not call a cab, does not leave. Exactly what passes between them at the table during those hours, no one can say for certain. What is known is that the evening does not break apart on the spot, that they keep sitting together, and that in the end, they leave the bar together. That is enough to keep the chain of events going. Together, they drive out of the city toward her house in Renton. That is about 16 miles from downtown Seattle. The route follows ordinary highways, familiar to anyone who lives in the suburbs. A quiet suburb, a calm street. The house she has been living in for several years now. On a map, this is an ordinary route Ingrid has driven countless times. In meaning, it is the last drive she will make alive. At this stage, the evening still looks outwardly normal. The guy is too drunk. The woman drives him home, or offers to take him along. Nothing out of the ordinary. That is how thousands of dates end every Friday in every big city in the world. No sirens are going off in her head at this moment, evidently. Otherwise, she would have done things differently. But what she knows about Charlton rests on a month of messages, 2 or 3 dates, and an internet profile. That is too little to understand who she is taking back to her house through suburban blocks. Late in the evening of April 8th, the car stops at Ingrid's house in Renton. The two of them go inside. From this point on, what had been unfolding as an ordinary date comes to an end. Everything after this unfolds without witnesses. According to investigators, at some point in this house, an attack takes place. As a result of it, Ingrid loses her life. That will be the legal classification accepted by the court and agreed to by the defendant himself. No screams, no sounds of a struggle were reported by neighbors. The street is quiet, the houses stand at a distance, the windows are closed, and the night in the suburbs is deep. What happens behind the walls of this house does not reach the outside until morning. Charlton himself will later tell investigators that he was, as he put it, too drunk to remember. That phrase will be repeated by every major American outlet covering the case. On paper, it is an alcoholic blackout, a loss of memory, an inability to explain, but the investigation will reject that account. Charlton's further actions during the night and into the morning will turn out to be too purposeful for a man in a complete blackout. After what happened, there is a body in the house and a man who has to make a decision. He has 2 obvious options. The first is to call the police, confess, explain, ask for help. That is the option most people choose, even after terrible episodes. The second is to try to hide what happened and pretend he was never in this house. Charlton chooses the second path. He does not call the police, does not call anyone for help, does not step out the door even to tell the neighbors. Instead, he begins to act in a way that is meant to conceal what happened. From this moment on, what is going on inside the house is no longer a drunken night, but the cold work of a man who understands what he has just done. That work takes him the rest of the night and part of the morning. Charlton does not leave the house in Renton right away. He stays inside and acts in stages. According to the prosecution's filings, after Ingrid's death, the suspect took steps to conceal what had happened. The body was not preserved intact. That is the legal characterization the defendant himself will later accept as part of his plea agreement. The sequence of events was reconstructed by forensic specialists from the trace evidence left in the house. Among the items later seized from the scene is an ordinary garden tool. It will become one of the pieces of evidence and will be referenced in the public court documents. The remains are placed into several ordinary bags. Charlton's actions look chaotic and unplanned. He has no plan, no experience, no one to turn to for help. But that very chaos will later become one of the prosecution's arguments against the version of a complete blackout. After this, Charlton takes the keys to Ingrid's car. It is her own vehicle, the one she had been driving the day before. He gets behind the wheel and drives out of Renton towards Seattle. The distance is about 16 miles, a regular suburban road on which there are almost no other cars at night. He drives into the city to dispose of what is left. The end point of the route is a set of ordinary recycling bins in a residential neighborhood of Seattle. It is not a landfill on the outskirts, not a body of water, not a wooded area. It is a place that residents of nearby houses will walk past in the morning. He leaves the bags there and drives away. Perhaps he is counting on the garbage truck arriving before anyone notices. In reality, the opposite will happen. That decision, within 24 hours, will lead investigators straight to him. Where he tried to bury the loose ends, the real case will begin. That morning starts like an ordinary Saturday in the suburbs. April 9th, 2016, Renton, Washington State, around 10 in the morning. Ingrid's ex-husband pulls up to her house on routine family business. He knocks at the door, waits, rings the bell. No one opens. It is quiet inside. Her car is not in the driveway either, and for a Saturday morning, that looks strange. Ingrid rarely leaves early without saying anything. He tries to call her phone. Ingrid does not answer calls or messages. That does not look like her at all. She is the kind of person who calls back, who answers messages, who does not leave those close to her hanging. A few more people close to her gather at the house. They look at one another and understand one thing. Something is wrong. There is no room left for a casual explanation. At first, there is still hope. Maybe her car would not start. Maybe she stayed at a friend's place. Maybe her phone is dead. But the hours pass, the silence grows thicker, and every additional hour makes the picture more troubling. Ingrid is not the kind of woman who disappears for a day without a trace. The people who have known her a long time understand this better than anyone. A formal missing person report is filed for an adult woman. The Renton police begin an initial check. That is a standard procedure, confirming personal data, interviewing those close to her, checking whether any plans had been announced ahead of time for that Saturday. There were no such plans. Ingrid had a Friday, baseball, a bar, and a presumed return home. From that point on, she was supposed to be seen in the morning at her own house. At this stage, no one yet knows that what they are dealing with is not a missing person, but a crime. The police are working with the hypothesis of a disappearance. The real picture will start to surface within those same 24 hours, and it will arrive from a completely different part of the city. That other part of the city is an ordinary residential neighborhood of Seattle, where a calm Saturday is still going on. On the same day, a man named Mike Navazio walks up to the trash bins outside his house. It is a routine domestic action. Take out the garbage, throw out the packaging, look into the recycling bins before the truck arrives. Movements like that are nearly automatic for any suburban resident. In one of the bins, he notices something that should not be there. The contents of the bags clearly go beyond ordinary household waste. From the very first signs, it becomes obvious that he is looking at human remains. Navazio does not try to touch anything or move anything around. He immediately calls the police. That call will mark the beginning of the breakthrough. A patrol unit, forensic specialists, and homicide detectives arrive at the scene. The bins are cordoned off. The area is secured. The forensic team confirms the worst. Inside, there really are the remains of a person. From the initial signs, they determine that it is a middle-aged woman. There are no documents or personal belongings nearby, but the very fact of the find already turns the missing person report from Renton into something completely different. The distance from the find to Ingred Line's home is about 10 miles. For Greater Seattle, that is close. Matching the time of the disappearance with the nature of the find takes investigators not days but hours. In parallel, work is going on to identify the remains and to check every report of a missing woman in the area over the past day. By the evening of April 10th, the picture becomes clear. The missing nurse from Renton and the unidentified deceased woman found in Seattle are the same person. This is no longer a missing person case. This is a homicide. From here, investigators have only one path: to reconstruct the events of the past day, find the car, and establish who was with Ingrid in her last hours. The reconstruction of those hours begins in the place where they happened. The police obtain a search warrant for Ingrid's house in Renton. Forensic specialists go inside and immediately designate the residence as a crime scene. That means everything inside is documented, photographed, and described according to protocol. No free movement, no unnecessary contact with any object. Even the initial walkthrough produces key evidence. In the bathroom, biological traces are documented. That is direct material evidence that a violent event took place inside the house. In one of the rooms, a garden tool is found. That object immediately becomes one of the central pieces of evidence and will appear in the public record of the case. On the floor and in the bathroom, there are signs that point to acts of concealment, foreign particles, traces of objects having been moved. None of this looks like ordinary household disorder. In parallel, investigators issue an alert for the victim's vehicle. The car is tracked down quickly, and it is not where it should be. Its location and condition show that it had been used for transport after the crime. Inside the vehicle, forensic specialists also document trace evidence relevant to the case. Each such detail is added to the overall record. By this point, the investigators have a clear picture. The victim lost her life inside her own house in Renton. The body was moved using her own car and left in a neighborhood of Seattle. Between those 2 points, there is a specific road, a specific window of time, and a specific person who was with her last. They do not have to look long for that person's name. The next step for the police is obvious. Locate Charlton and arrest him before he can put any distance between himself and Seattle. The name John Robert Charlton appears in the case very quickly. His connection to Ingrid through the dating site is confirmed by their messenger conversations and by witnesses among their acquaintances. Through the service where they met, the dates, contacts, and exchange of messages over the previous weeks are easy to establish. That immediately rules out a number of alternative theories and narrows the circle to one person. In parallel, work on the witness side moves forward. Witnesses from the Mariners game and staff from the bar identify the couple from photographs. Their evening on April 8th breaks down into recognizable fragments: the stadium, the exit, the bar, the table. The picture of the last hours of Ingrid's life lines up into a clear chain. To that chain are added the victim's car and its movements after the crime, which point unambiguously to Charlton. On the morning of April 11, 2016, Seattle police arrest him. Less than 3 days have passed since Ingrid's disappearance. For a case of this scale and this complexity, that is a very short time. The investigation worked quickly and confidently. Charlton is taken to the precinct and placed in an interview room. According to investigators, during the conversation he behaves, in their word, indifferently. That word will appear in police materials and will later be repeated by the major American outlets. No tears, no broken emotions, no attempt to fake remorse. A calm man on the other side of the table, answering questions in the tone people normally reserve for everyday matters. He does not deny that he was with Ingrid on the evening of April 8th. He does not try to claim that he never saw her that day at all. That line of defense is closed for him. Too many witnesses, too much trace evidence, too obvious a chain. Instead, he chooses another move. He says that he drank so much that he does not remember what happened next. From that single phrase, the entire official line of his defense will begin. That single phrase is the foundation on which the entire defense is built. Charlton claims that he does not remember either the event itself or his actions afterward. By his words, at the bar, he had too much to drink. After that comes a blackout. And everything that took place at the house in Renton stayed beyond the reach of his memory. He calls himself homeless, an alcoholic, and a man for whom things are, as he puts it, not all right. That is a self-description he repeats to investigators, and that will later appear in all the key press materials. The prosecution rejects this explanation for a simple reason. The acts of concealment are far too purposeful for a man in a complete blackout. Using the victim's vehicle, driving from Renton to Seattle, choosing specific recycling bins, all of that is a sequence of decisions that require spatial orientation and the preservation of basic logic and behavior. A person in a blackout of that scale does not navigate at night across a city to specific addresses and then return the car. The investigation classifies what happened as premeditated first-degree murder. That is the most serious charge available. It presumes deliberate actions and an understanding of their consequences. In addition, Charlton is charged with the theft of the victim's vehicle. Using her car to move the remains is treated as a separate count. On April 13, 2016, the official charges are read in court. Charlton is brought into the courtroom. The clerk reads the formal language. The judge enters the procedure into the record. At this stage, the defendant initially pleads not guilty. That is a typical step that leaves the defense room to maneuver, a chance to negotiate, to bargain over a plea, to contest individual counts. The case is sent forward to the preparation of a full trial. The prosecution begins assembling the evidence base for trial on the merits. The defense prepares to build its line around an alcoholic blackout. Ahead of them lies a year and a half of preliminary work. That year and a half of preparation gives journalists and investigators time to reconstruct Charlton's biography in full. Alongside the preparation for trial, a separate effort begins. Requests to the archives of 6 states, checks on convictions, the pulling up of old cases. The picture turns out to be longer and heavier than what the police saw on the day of the arrest. That same trail across 6 states comes into focus. The robbery in Utah, the grand theft in Montana, auto theft, assaults, petty theft in different places. Each episode has its own date, its own court, its own sentence. Between those episodes are relocations, the absence of a permanent address, years of life without steady work. This is not a single breakdown or a stray story. It is a steady pattern of a life. In parallel, the parents' 2006 petition resurfaces. The court documents are pulled up and published by the American media. What had been kept in the archives for 10 years is now on the front pages. The restraining order, the description of aggression while intoxicated, the domestic episodes after which the parents made themselves take that step, the fear of his own mother. These documents add up to a single picture of a man with a long history of aggression, recognized even by the people closest to him. That information existed long before he met Ingrid. Every line of it had been available to law enforcement and the courts. But no ordinary online dating procedure shows any of it. It stays inside closed databases and court archives, to which an ordinary woman from Renton has neither access nor any tool. Journalists and security experts begin to discuss the topic of running background checks on partners from dating sites. The Ingred Line case becomes one of the public arguments in that discussion. On professional channels, breakdowns appear of what could have been learned about Charlton in 5 minutes through open sources, if only one had known where to look. For Ingrid herself, those discussions no longer exist. While those breakdowns reach a wide audience, the case itself drags through difficult procedural work. For a year and a half after his arrest, Charlton sits in the King County Jail. He is brought out for short hearings, recorded in the case file, and taken back. The preparation for trial moves slowly. The defense and prosecution exchange materials, run examinations, and coordinate witness schedules. By this point, the prosecution has assembled the full evidence base. On the prosecutor's table sit the forensic record from the house in Renton with biological traces and the garden tool, the materials on the victim's vehicle, the chain of witnesses from the game and the bar, the messages through the dating site, the defendant's record across 6 states of criminal incidents, and the parents' 2006 petition. Each block of that base can be carried into a courtroom and held in front of a jury. The defense ends up facing a difficult choice. The line of an alcoholic blackout remains, but the entire physical record works against it. Going to a full trial means risking the harshest possible scenario, a verdict on every count without any leniency. On October 2, 2017, Charlton unexpectedly changes his position. In a King County courtroom, he pleads guilty to all counts. That means he agrees with the classification of premeditated first-degree murder, and with the charge of the theft of the victim's vehicle. Legally, that closes the dispute on the merits. There will no longer be an examination of the question of whether he did it or did not. There will only be the question of the sentence. The guilty plea removes the need for a full jury trial. The case moves to the sentencing stage. The friends and people close to Ingrid prepare to speak in court with statements about her role in their lives. For them, this is not just a procedure. It is the first and only moment when they will be able to say, in public, in the courtroom, in the presence of the man who took her life, everything they wanted to say about her. That moment comes on January 5, 2018, the King County Superior Court, Washington State. In the courtroom, there are representatives of the prosecution and defense, journalists and friends and people close to Ingrid. Standing before Judge Julie Spector is no longer a defendant, but a man who has admitted his guilt on every count. The atmosphere in the room is calm and heavy at the same time. The end is near. Friends and people close to Ingrid read out their statements. These are what are known as victim impact statements, addresses to the court from those whose lives the crime changed forever. They speak about who she was, how she helped, how she was a steady presence, what they lost in April 2016. By the reports from the hearing, the friends of the victim spoke directly to Charlton without trying to choose diplomatic phrases. The prosecution requests the maximum possible sentence under the state's guidelines. That means the prosecutor asks the court to use everything the law allows so that the punishment is as harsh as the law permits, given the plea agreement that has been reached. The judge hands down the sentence, 27 years and 9 months in prison. That is the absolute ceiling allowed under the framework of the state given such a plea. Legally, there was no going higher, and it is right here that Judge Spector makes a statement that will land in the headlines of the largest American outlets. By her words, if state law had allowed it, she would have imposed a life sentence. That is a rare public position for a judge, to say openly that the ceiling provided by the law is not enough for a particular case. That phrase will be quoted in every story devoted to the sentencing. Charlton listens to the decision and is taken away to serve his time. On paper, the case is closed. The charge has been proven, the guilt has been admitted, the sentence has been handed down at the upper limit. In the lives of the people close to Ingrid, no. No number of years in a cell brings back that morning of April 9th, when at the house in Renton silence was waiting for them. That silence at the house in Renton in time grew into a case that the entire country was talking about. The story of Ingred Line reached far beyond Renton and Seattle. The largest American outlets and television networks covered the case. The Seattle Times, CBS News, Fox News, NBC News, a number of regional channels. Detailed reports came out at every stage, from the discovery in the bin to the sentencing. Documentary programs and podcasts appeared, walking through the timeline step by step. That format became especially in demand in the United States in the second half of the 20s. The true crime genre saw a surge, and the Ingrid Line case took its own place within it. The case began to be cited as an example in conversations about online dating and its safety. On professional platforms, a more active discussion began about the need to run background checks on partners. On private websites, guides appeared on which open sources can be used to check a new acquaintance before meeting in person. Court record databases, open registries, searches by name and by photograph, all of the things that in Charlton's case would have shown 6 states and the parental restraining order in 5 minutes. After 2016, this topic stopped being seen as excessive caution. Ingrid herself remained in the memory of her colleagues as a nurse you could rely on. At Swedish Medical Center, she was remembered for a long time. Those who worked alongside her on shifts spoke of her as one of the most attentive and composed people there. Those close to her continue to speak of her as a woman whose life was cut short in the middle of a simple evening. An ordinary date after a work week turned into a case that became one of the touchstone examples in the conversation about the safety of online dating. The central question this story began with is still open to this day. Could it have been prevented? And what is the price of trusting a stranger from the internet? Each new generation meeting people online will have to answer that one all over again.